Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a massive historical mystery. How did a tiny first-century movement manage to outlast the mighty Roman Empire? You know, history is absolutely full of empires that rose and fell, but the sheer survival and expansion of this particular group defies pretty much every historical expectation.
Picture this staggering, historical mismatch. On one side, you have 12 ordinary men. We're talking fishermen and tax collectors with zero wealth, no political power, and certainly no army. And on the other side, the Roman Empire, a highly sophisticated superpower controlling a third of the global population, defined entirely by absolute, unmatched, and brutal military force. By every conventional metric of power, this movement should have been completely crushed within a few years. It's the ultimate underdog story. So how did 12 ordinary men essentially topple an empire and go on to shape modern civilization? Part 1. An impossible mission begins. The ancient world in 30 AD. Let's set the stage. The year is around 30 AD, and the unforgiving reality of the Roman world is that order is maintained through absolute force. In this harsh society, their leader, Jesus of Nazareth, challenged the authorities and suffered a devastating public execution. He was crucified. And crucifixion was the most humiliating punishment in Rome, reserved specifically for rebels and slaves. By every measure of human history, the execution of a founder should have extinguished this movement on the spot.
Part 2. The Resurrection Claim, defying the end of the story.
Well, the followers who had initially scattered in fear suddenly reappeared, and they made a wild claim. Their leader had risen from the dead. Now, objective historiography actually grounds this narrative. We have historical sources and artifacts that verify the undeniable footprint of these early believers. We aren't just relying on internal texts here. Roman Jewish historians like Josephus and Roman governors like Pliny the Younger documented their lives and practices. Plus, ancient artifacts like the Codex Sinaiticus provide tangible physical evidence of their enduring texts.
Here's a crucial number to wrap your head around: 11. 11 of the 12 original apostles were brutally martyred. They were crucified, beheaded, or thrown to lions for a resurrection claim that they personally refused to recant. Historical sources emphasize that it is extraordinarily rare for so many people to accept a horrific death for something they claim to have witnessed with their own eyes. They weren't dying for some distant, passed-down legend. They were dying for a conviction they absolutely refused to abandon.
Part 3. Explosive growth and radical love, the power of Pentecost and agape.
Despite this incredibly severe threat of death, the movement experienced an absolute explosion following the event known as Pentecost. The narrative shifts right here, going from a small, localized group of terrified followers to a bold, rapidly expanding community. And what's fascinating is how their countercultural practices made them deeply threatening to the rigid Roman hierarchy. They were driven by agape, a selfless, unconditional love. In a world completely defined by strict social strata, these people were feeding the impoverished, caring for the sick, and welcoming slaves and women as absolute equals. They were crossing strict ethnic lines that the ancient world considered literally impossible to bridge.
And this radically inclusive community attracted followers incredibly fast. To put into perspective, the Book of Acts reports that 3,000 people joined the movement on a single day in Jerusalem. 3,000! And it grew not through military conquest, but through word of mouth and radical community action.
Part 4. Missions to the world, spreading the message across the globe. So instead of staying hidden away in Judea, these ordinary men walked directly into hostile territories. Armed with nothing but their conviction, they scattered to the absolute ends of the known world, completely lacking wealth or diplomatic immunity. By 52 AD, historical traditions indicate the Apostle Thomas established a community in India that actually still traces its roots to him today. And by 67 AD, the movement had reached the very heart of the empire, Rome itself.
Just take Paul of Tarsus as an example. Here's a guy who was a former zealous persecutor of the church. He experiences a dramatic conversion and then subsequently travels over 10,000 miles to spread the movement. 10,000 miles! He journeyed on foot and by sea, surviving shipwrecks and imprisonment, just to establish communities across modern-day Turkey, Greece, and Italy.
Part 5. The sublime within the malign, the glorious paradox of the early church.
Now, we have to remember that this history was not some sterilized, perfect progression. Not at all. It was fraught with human flaws and brutal external persecution. Believers were often forced underground into the Roman catacombs.
Scholar Frank Viola provides a really fascinating sociological insight here, highlighting the constant crises these early communities navigated. As he explores in his work, the letters of the New Testament were largely written to communities experiencing a first-class crisis. They were constantly falling apart and facing intense opposition. It was at times a real train wreck.
But I love how this perfectly captures a historical reality. Despite the mess of human frailties and the sheer darkness of the Roman Colosseum, something deeply sublime survived. The story is, as the quote says, a glorious paradox, the sublime within the malign. It's a paradox of unmatched wonder sitting right alongside a persistent mess.
Part 6. Transforming the Roman Empire. The underdog becomes the institution.
Ultimately, this brings us to a monumental turning point, where the persecuted underdog actually triumphed over the very empire that sought to destroy it. After nearly 300 years of underground survival, the year 312 AD marked a massive shift. The Roman Emperor Constantine embraced the symbol of Christ, changing history forever. When his forces marched under the Chi-Rho banner at the Milvian Bridge, it signaled the exact moment the empire essentially bowed to the movement it had spent centuries trying to eradicate.
The sociological fingerprints of those 12 men, they are absolutely everywhere today. They fundamentally shape the institutions and moral frameworks of our modern society. From establishing early hospitals and organized care, to founding the first universities, inspiring Gothic cathedrals, art and music, and even providing the foundational text and leadership for global abolition and civil rights movements. The legacy of this early community is thoroughly embedded in global civilization.
So, we leave you with this final thought to ponder. If a movement born in execution outlasted the empire that tried to destroy it, what other impossible histories are waiting to be uncovered? Thank you for watching this explainer, and we hope it inspired you to dig even deeper.